Hello everyone, welcome to Twilight. Problem is Possibility, and this is Dr. Rajlakshmi. Today I am here to talk about approach to tropical diseases and main elaboration will be on dengue fever and dengue hemorrhagic shock. So I'll start up with the case vignette. A 35 years old female patient, an IT employee, came to ER with history of fever with severe body and joint pain since 6 days. Bleeding gums, abdominal pain since morning, since 1 day. She's been taking paracetamol intermittently. There are no any background comorbidities. Vitals, her GCS is 15 by 50. She is conscious, coherent, following commands. Heart rate 130 per minute, sinus tachycardia, blood pressure 170, respiratory rate 30 per minute. She is bit tachypneic, saturation 95% with room air, extremities are cold, peripheral pulses are feeble. She is on her 6th day of fever with borderline blood pressure 170 with normal with sinus tachycardia and with tachypneic. Extremities are cold but pulses are feeble. Oxygenation wise she is good. So a young female, fever with borderline blood pressure and cool extremities. The provisional diagnosis, especially in our setup, Indian setup, we should always rule out tropical diseases because India is endemic zone for all tropical diseases like malaria, dengue, leptospirosis, scrub typhus. So we should rule out all tropical diseases and any other infections, any other gram negative or any other viral infection can cause all these symptoms and signs. So any other infection causing coagulopathy, it can be malignancy because young female bone marrow malignancy is a possibility. It's especially between 30 to 50 years, and it can be some autoimmune disease. One of the non-infective cause of the fever is autoimmune diseases. Coming to her labs, her CVP hemoglobin 19.6 grams per deciliter. That means hemoglobin is on higher side. TLC is 2000, platelets 20,000. She is thrombocytopenic, leukocytopenic. There is bicytopenia with high hemoglobin. High hemoglobin can be because of hemoconcentration. Renal function test, urea is 50 milligram per deciliter, creatinine is 1.8. There is acute kidney injury and sodium potassium are within normal limits. Liver functional test, total bilirubin 2.2, direct bilirubin total bilirubin 3.3, direct bilirubin 2. There is direct hyperbilirubinemia. SGOT and SGPT on higher side 2500 and 2000. Alkaline phosphatase bit on higher side, albumin is on lower side. PTINR within normal limits. Her coagulation profile is normal. PTINR is normal. That means liver function is normal, but there is direct hyperbilirubinemia. Some amount of cholestasis is there because alkaline phosphatase is also on higher side, and liver enzymes are elevated. So it can be some hepatitis, some viral fever causing hepatitis, or hepatitis infection itself can cause hepatitis with thrombocytopenia and other organ involvement, or it can be some intra-abdominal sepsis. It can be because of intra-abdominal infection like it can be liver abscess or cholecystitis. So we can take the help of ultrasound to rule out any uh, incidents or evidence of gallstones or cholecystitis, and to rule out any liver abscess. And we have to send hepatitis workup also, hepatitis A, B, C, and E to rule out uh, presence of viral hepatitis. So considering her lab, she is bicytopenic with high hematocrit, acute kidney injury, and hepatitis. All tropical diseases can cause this kind of presentation. They can cause acute kidney injury, they can cause hepatitis and liver failure. So how to rule out depending upon labs and physical examination. How can we delineate or narrow down our tropical workup considering her lab investigations and history. If it is dengue fever, there will be high grade fever with joint pains, headache. Sometimes there can be rash, especially after a week time of fever, patient can having some itchy rash, or in especially on third to seventh day there can be petechial and purpurar rash can be there. In dengue, there can be raised hemoglobin. Hematocrit will be raised because of concentration, and there will be bicytopenia, leukopenia, and thrombocytopenia, and there can be involvement of kidney, acute kidney injury, especially when presentation is delayed. The main pathogenetic feature of dengue is capillary leak and intravascular uh, volume depletion. So if it is not addressed properly in the first week, there is a possibility of acute kidney injury. If patient is not taking adequate fluids, not maintaining adequate hydration, in case of the delayed presentation, there can be involvement of the kidney, acute kidney injury at the admission itself. If it is malaria, the fever can be at 3 stages. The fever actually, in case of malaria, intermittent fever. It can be regularly at a it can occur at regular interval or it can occur irregular interval depending upon the species of the bug, species of the parasite. Three-stage fever. Initially, the fever starts with shivering. The shivering will last for 1 to 2 hours, and there will be fever spike. High-grade fever will be there. High-grade means it can be up to 103, 104, sometimes 105 is also has been recorded. That fever spike will last for 3 to 6 hours, and followed by there will be profuse face fatigue and cooling down. The temperature will come back to a baseline. So this is typical fever trend in case of the malaria. And the main pathology behind the malaria is hemolysis. So patient will be anemic. So we cannot expect patient to have a normal hemoglobin, at least a high hemoglobin, if it is malaria. Hemoglobin will be low. On physical examination, patient will be anemic with pale palpebral conjunctiva. There will be leukocytosis or it can be normal TLC. Leukocytopenia is not expected in case of the malaria. It can be seen in rare scenarios, but most of the times the leukocyte count can be normal. Sometimes there will be leukocytosis. Thrombocytopenia is one of the feature of malaria, and kidney involvement can be there in malaria, especially in the early stage. Leptospira, in Leptospira scrub typhus, in both the infections, high grade fever with myalgia, body pains, and joint pains, and there will be multi system involvement. Liver, kidney, and brain involvement can be seen in both the infections. Leptospira, predominantly there will be jaundice, there will be cholestasis, and icterus can be there at the time of the presentation. In some scenarios, Leptospira can be associated with some skin and soft tissue infection, especially if patient is a farmer or some field worker. The bug will the spirochete enters into the circulation by through some wound on the skin. So we should always look for skin and soft tissue infection in case of Leptospira or otherwise. If skin and soft tissue infection patient presents with thrombocytopenia, we should always able to rule out Leptospira as a possibility of his presentation. In Leptospira, hemoglobin is normal, leukocytosis will be there, thrombocytopenia will be there, and there will be predominant involvement of kidney. There will be predominant acute kidney injury, sometimes complete renal failure, and may land up with dialysis because of rhabdomyolysis. Rhabdomyolysis is one of the feature of Leptospira. If CPK is elevated and there is acute kidney injury, you should always rule out Leptospira. Coming to scrub typhus, there will be lymphadenopathy, and if you suspect scrub typhus, you should always look for an eschar all over the body. Hemoglobin is normal. There can be bicytopenia with kidney involvement, and most of the times the scrub typhus infection in most of the scenarios patient will be encephalopathic. Some degree of altered sensorium will be there. Bilirubin, in dengue, there will be direct hyperbilirubinemia, especially end of the first week and during second week. At the time of the presentation, the first week of illness, the bilirubin can be normal. And transaminase will be elevated in the first week of illness in case of the dengue. Coagulopathy is a bit rare unless it is very much severe dengue or advanced cases. DIC will not happen in dengue unless it's a dengue hemorrhagic fever, and if you the treatment has been delayed, that delayed, DIC is a rare phenomenon in case of the dengue unless it's a dengue shock syndrome. Malaria, because it's a hemolysis, indirect hyperbilirubinemia will be there, transaminase will be normal, and coagulopathy is rare in case of the malaria. Leptospira, definitely there will be cholestasis, direct hyperbilirubinemia there. There is a possibility of elevation of transaminase also, but most of the times it is not in thousands. It can, most of times the SGOT-PT will be less than 1000, and coagulopathy is common, liver failure and DIC is common in case of neglected leptospira infections. Scrub typhus, there can be cholestatic jaundice will be there, direct hyperbilirubinemia will be there, transaminase elevation will be there. Coagulopathy is not that common unless it is very much neglected and in case of delayed diagnosis. How do we diagnose dengue? Once we find a patient with fever, rash, severe myalgia, we should go ahead with further investigative workup to confirm the diagnosis. Before going ahead with the diagnostic workup, we look at what are the phases in case of the dengue fever. The incubation period for this infection is 3 to 5 days. Once the virus has been inoculated into the circulation of a human being, the symptoms will start after a period of 3 to 5 days. And the disease phase has three phases: febrile phase, effervescence, or critical phase, spontaneous recovery. During febrile phase, patient will be having high-grade fever, myalgia, joint pains. There can be headache and retroorbital pain. In terms of the labs, there will be increased hemoglobin because of hemo concentration secondary to the capillary link, and there will be bicytopenia and elevation of SGOT and SGPT transaminase elevation will be there. The most important phase of this disease is effervescence or critical phase. By the end of the febrile phase, the capillary leak will be maximum. Capillary leak will increases as the febrile phase uh, as the febrile phase is coming down, the vascular leak will be increasing hemo concentration and hyperproteinemia, pleural effusion, ascites we can notice in during effervescence phase. But in the certain patients where the disease severity is very much high, it can lead to dengue shock syndrome and dengue hemorrhagic fever. So after fifth day or sixth day of the fever, we should be very much carefully monitor the patient for all these signs: cold extremities, narrow pulse pressure, high lactate or high iron gap metabolic acidosis, and a positive tourniquet test, bleeding tendency. These are all the signs we have to look in case of the effervescence or critical phase after fifth day of the fever. The problem with the dengue hemorrhagic fever or dengue shock syndrome is the blood pressure can be normal. Systolic blood pressure, mean arterial pressure can be normal, but diastolic pressure will be high, pulse pressure will be narrowed down. The warning signs for dengue hemorrhagic fever are increasing hematocrit in spite of your fluid resuscitation, sudden rapid drop of platelets, persistent vomitings, severe abdominal pain, tender hepatomegaly, and severe effusions. Effusions are increasing. The ascites and pleural effusions will increases, and mucosal bleeding because of thrombocytopenia and because of the capillary leak, and lethargy, restlessness. CNS involvement can also happen during critical phase. So by the end of the fifth or sixth day of fever, if platelets are not improving, platelets are not started increasing, and patient is becoming restless, or there will be severe abdominal pain or vomiting, should be you should closely monitor the patient for all these signs: for cold extremities, for narrow pulse pressure, and high lactate and high iron gap metabolic acidosis, and should look for positive tourniquet test and bleeding tendency. So this is sometimes the blood pressure itself can be deceiving, so you should able to C. Systolic blood pressure, diastolic blood pressure, pulse pressure individually. If systolic blood pressure is normal, pulse pressure is narrowed, and it has been associated with metabolic acidosis and high lactate, means should consider the diagnosis of dengue shock syndrome, dengue hemorrhagic fever, and shift the patient to the ICU. He or she requires very much close monitoring and regular checkup of all coagulation parameters and liver parameters. Recovery phase. Once the critical phase gets over, recovery or spontaneous recovery phase will start after 2 to 3 days of uh, defervescence phase. All signs starts resolving, platelets should start increasing, and there will be itchy maculopapular rash all over the body. So by the end of 7th or 8th day, patient complains of some rash. We don't have to worry much about that rash. If platelets are starts improving, if patient is not complaining of any fever, and if there is no abdominal pain or headache, we should not pay much attention to this itchy maculopapular rash. We should just reassure the patient it's a part of the recovery phase. What is main pathophysiology behind this dengue hemorrhagic fever or dengue shock syndrome? The hallmark features of pathophysiology of dengue are capillary permeability, increased capillary permeability and fragile capillaries, and deranged hemostasis. Even now, after many decades of research, the clear-cut pathophysiology is not been documented. The pathophysiologies remain obscure. The main statement that we have to remember is immune system plays a major role in the pathophysiology of the dengue fever, because if we look at the phases of the disease, the severity of the disease or the critical phase occurs when the fever is coming down. That means when the immune system has been activated, when immune system tries to clear the viral particles from the circulation, the disease becoming severe. That means the immune response is being played a major role uh, behind the pathophysiology of the dengue fever. Sometimes, actually, the mortality of the dengue is less than 1%. It has been tremendously decreased in last few decades because of extensive research is been because of extensive research over dengue, and the diagnosis, we have a very much precise diagnostic kits, and we are able to diagnose the dengue in very much early stage, and we are able to take care of all those patients in the first week itself, and we are able to prevent all those complications secondary to the dengue virus or dengue fever. But in certain scenarios, in certain scenarios, the disease can be severe because of all these factors. The risk factors for developing severe dengue fever are younger age, female gender, obesity, increased BMI, secondary infections with the different serotype. Most of the times, if the primary infection is mild, but secondary, if patient has infection for the second time, the severity of the infection will be high, because the heterologous immunity lasts for 1 to 2 years. After 2 years, the patient will not be immune to other serotype. For example, during primary infection, patient infected with the dengue serotype 1, if during secondary infection, if he infects with dengue serotype 2, the immunity will not work. So the heterologous immunity will last for 1 to 2 years. So because of this, the severity of the dengue will be high because of immune memory. The immune response will be hazard aggravated in case of second infection with a different serotype because of genetic memory. And genetic predispositions like human major histocompatibility complex class 1, related sequence B, and phospholipase C epsilon 1. These two genes uh, predispose to severe dengue infection. So coming to, so these are all entities behind pathophysiology of a dengue fever. Viral related factors, NS1 antigen, dengue virus genome variations, and subgenomic RNA. Host factors, antidependent enhancement, memory cross-reactive T cells, NS1 antibodies, and autoimmunity. So once virus enters into the circulation, it will activate the macrophage cells. These virus-infected macrophage cells or dendritic cells will stimulate release of all inflammatory markers, cytokines, and interleukin molecules. And these macrophages will also activate natural killer cells and memory T cells. All these factors together causes inflammatory cascade, and this activated inflammatory cascade will act on endothelium and will disrupt glycocalyx, increases capillary permeability. Not only the host immune response, the NS1 antigen itself acts on the endothelium and glycocalyx. It causes release of heparin sulfate of glycocalyx. It further aggravates the capillary leak. So both NS1 antigen, the viral particle itself, and the activated immune system will causes disruption of endothelium and glycocalyx. The core role has been played by the activation of complement system. The complement system will get activated by all these inflammatory markers, and enough toxins from this complement system will get released into the circulation. All these factors together aggravates the capillary leak, and there will be loss of protein. Along with protein, there will be loss of coagulation factors. If the disease severity will be high because of loss of coagulation factors or coagulation proteins, there is a possibility of coagulopathy, DIC, and bleed. That is the when we call it as dengue shock syndrome or dengue hemorrhagic fever. So this cascade cannot be controlled in certain scenarios in case of severe dengue fever. If you look at capillary permeability during febrile phase, during first 5 days, the capillary permeability is low. The peak of capillary permeability we can see between 5 to 7 days. This is critical phase. During this phase, the active immune system or the active inflammatory cascade or inflammatory reaction will go on in the human body. Dengue is a mosquito-borne flavivirus infection and is primarily transmitted by a mosquito, Aedes aegypti, followed by Aedes albopicus and other species of genus Aedes. Mainly there are 4 serotypes, 1, 2, 3, 4, but the 5th serotype also has been identified in Malaysia, October 2013. If you look at serology, serological difference between primary and secondary infection. We can see NS1 in the primary infection up to 7 days, but in the secondary infection, because of immune system memory, we can see NS1 only up to 5 days. We can detect NS1 antigen with the help of ELISA or rapid kits. Otherwise, we can do PCR test. But PCR test is a bit expensive and availability is a bit limited. We mainly rely upon the ELISA based or rapid kits to detect NS1 antigen. IgM response we will start from the 4th day of illness, both in primary and secondary infection. But if we look at IgG response more profound in case of secondary infection. We can see IgG even within first week of the disease in secondary infection. But in the primary infection, we can see IgG only after a week period. So first time in primary infection, primarily have more strong IgM response. In secondary infection, there will be the stronger IgG response. So coming to symptoms, bicytopenia, elevated hematocrit, and positive NS1 antigen, positive antibody. These clinical symptoms: fever, myalgia, body pains, bicytopenia, and hemoconcentration, NS1 plus IgM antibody, and IgM or IgG antibody. All these together helps us to diagnose or confirm the diagnosis of the dengue fever. More precisely, if we can demonstrate seroconversion in the first sample, IgM negative, and after a gap of 3 days, if IgM is positive, means it's clear cut a case of dengue fever. How to manage? The core principles of managing a dengue patient is IV fluid resuscitation. We should always maintain a bit positive balance to maintain normal intravascular volume. Crystalloids, especially ringer lactate or other balanced salt solution preferred over colloids, should always use crystalloids. Among crystalloids, ringer lactate is preferred over any other crystalloids. Avoid a normal saline and monitoring. You should monitor all the vitals, blood pressure, heart rate, and sensorium. Monitor for any bleeding tendency, mucosal bleed or any petechiae or purpura, hematuria, and should always check the CBP, LFT, RFT at least in the with a gap of 24 to 48 hours. Check platelets once in a day till it shows increasing trend. LFT, RFT once in 48 hours will be fine. If you notice the elevated transaminases, you should do SGOT and PT at the interval of 24 hours. So you should monitor platelet count at least once in a day, SGOT, PT once in a day if there is increasing trend, and RFT once in 48 hours. You should always maintain normovolemia, and patient should be in the positive balance. And be vigilant about dengue shock syndrome and dengue hemorrhagic fever. It is a tricky situation because patient will not be having any hypotension. Uh, blood pressure can be normal, mean arterial pressure can be normal, but should able to look at all three parameters: systolic pressure, diastolic pressure, and pulse pressure individually. If pulse pressure is high, diastolic pressure is high, even systolic blood pressure is normal, that is the case of dengue shock syndrome. And the further markers which will clinch the diagnosis of dengue shock syndrome are high lactate, cold extremities. How to check a tourniquet test? Tie a BP cuff to the arm of a patient and increase the pressure. The pressure should be between systolic and diastolic pressure. For example, if systolic pressure is 100, diastolic pressure is 70. Increase the cuff pressure up to 85, and maintain that 85 millimeters of mercury for about 5 minutes, and then reduce, wait for 2 minutes. At the end of the 2 minutes, calculate, count the number of petechiae on the antecubital fossa. A positive test, 10 or more per square inch. So this is the way to do tourniquet test. This is a marker of capillary facility and more likely to be positive near the time of defervescence or critical phase. We cannot demonstrate this positive tourniquet test during febrile phase. If patient is in shock, hypotension, will not be able to demonstrate petechiae or positive tourniquet test. What is the role of transfusions? Definitely there is no role of prophylactic platelet transfusion unless platelet count is less than 10,000. If platelet count is 10,000, you can transfuse, and otherwise prophylactic platelet transfusion is not indicated. FFP, if there is a coagulopathy or DIC, you can transfuse FFP or cryo. PRBC, if patient is actively bleeding and having hemorrhagic shock or more than 10% of the blood loss, your patient will require PRBC transfusion. Complications: myocarditis, there will be hypotension or shock, elevated tropi with some ECG changes. Echo can be normal sometimes. Sometimes it can demonstrate some LV dysfunction or global hypokinesia. Encephalitis, there will be altered sensorium. GBS, Guillain-Barré syndrome is one of the possibility. DIC, pancreatitis, and liver failure. Coming to encephalopathy, the altered sensory in dengue can be secondary to some other metabolic issue, or it can be direct invasion of the virus. If it is direct invasion of the virus into the CNS, we can isolate virus from the CSF, or we can demonstrate antibody in the CSF. But challenge here is patient can be coagulopathic or thrombocytopenia, So getting a CSF, doing a lumbar puncture is bit challenging. So if you want to do a CSF analysis, you should always transfuse platelets, maintain a platelet count of at least more than 50,000, and do the lumbar puncture with lesser gauge needle as possible, and try to get CSF in a single shot. Avoid multiple pokes. Secondary causes of encephalopathy, it can be hyponatremia or some other dyselectrolytemia, liver failure, hepatic encephalopathy or hypoglycemia, hypoperfusion, or it can be stroke, hemorrhagic stroke, IC bleed. Definitely, there is no role of steroids. Steroids will not improve the platelet count. In fact, steroids can cause apoptotic disease on the background of thrombocytopenia, high chance of GI bleed. Completely avoid aspirin, ibuprofen, or other NSAIDs. Avoid PCM if hepatitis is present, and do cold sponging if fever is there. That completely avoid paracetamol if SUOT PD are raised. So this is all about dengue fever and approach to tropical diseases. And next class we'll meet with malaria, leptospira, scrub typhus.